Well, hello and welcome to Thursday Thoughts number 6. My name is Simon. I'm one of the leaders here at Ascot Life Church, and we're making these videos essentially just to respond to some big questions about faith, about who we are, about who God is in the world around us, questions that we might find ourselves asking more at this time, and just giving our short responses each Thursday lunchtime to those questions. Now, you may remember that last week we looked at the question, if God exists, why isn't there more evidence? And we saw that there are kind of 3 types of evidence which might point us towards the conclusion that God does exist. But I guess the question we're looking at this week is kind of a follow-on, a bit further down the line question, which is, well, if God exists, why should I trust Christianity to lead me to him? You know, yes, I might agree that there is a God out there to know, but why should I believe that Christianity is the way to know him? I mean, Christianity really makes a staggering claim for itself in saying that the only way to know God is through Jesus. That's why it's called Christianity. It's all about Jesus Christ. It's saying the way to know God is the only way is to know Jesus, to know God through him. Which, in our multi-faith, diverse world, might sound to us like a very arrogant claim. It might sound very intolerant, maybe even disrespectful to say there is only one way to know God. I mean, maybe that's your view of Christianity. I mean, we much prefer the idea, don't we, that all religions lead to God. That all of them are, if you like, different paths up the same mountain, reaching the same destination. Or we might say all religions are grasping at different parts of the same elephant, but they're all touching the same elephant. I wonder if you've heard that illustration before, that there's a bunch of blind men who stumble across an elephant, and one grabs the leg and said, this is a big, circular thing. This is a tree trunk we're grabbing. Another grabs the ear and says, no. It's like a stingray or something. It's something flat. It's like paper. And the other one grabs the trunk and says, no. This is moving and it's long. This is a snake that we're touching. But ultimately, they're all just grabbing at the same elephant. They might have different parts of it, but they're all reaching out to the same thing. And that might be the view that we want to take towards all the religions in the world today. Say, ultimately, they've all grasped something of the truth. Ultimately, they're all paths up the same mountain. They're all leading to the same God. Might sound humble to say that. The claim of Christianity that there's one way might sound arrogant, but this other way, to say that all religions lead to God, that might sound more humble, more tolerant to take that view. But I think there's actually 3 problems with this view that we have to take into account if we're going to use that as our way of looking at world religions. And I just want to cycle through each one of those with the time I've got this afternoon. So I think the first problem with saying that all religions lead to God is that ultimately that is not really a humble view towards these religions. I mean, it might sound humble. It might sound, humble to say, well, they're all grasping something. But ultimately, the question we should ask of someone who says that is, how do you know that? How are you in a position to be able to say all religions are leading towards the same God? How can you have the knowledge to see that? I mean, just think about those 2 illustrations I used earlier. Who is the one person on the mountain who is able to see that all the paths lead to the top? It's the person who's at the top. The only person who can see that eventually every path will lead to the summit is the one who is already at the summit. Or in the other illustration, who's the only one who can tell that all these blind men are grasping at the same elephant? Well, it's the person in the situation who isn't blind. It's the one who can see. Do you see what I'm saying? I'm saying that to say that all religions lead to the same God is actually the same as saying that you are the only one at the top of the mountain. Or that you are the only one who can see clearly. You know, you're saying that all these other world religions, they're blind, they've got something of the truth, but I'm the only one that can see the whole picture. I'm the only one who's at the top, who's enlightened to see that they all lead to the summit. I mean, it might sound like a humble thing to say, you know, they all lead to the same place, but ultimately, you're saying that you are the only one with full knowledge. You're saying that you have got ultimate knowledge of all these things. Which I think, in the end, we would all admit we don't. We would all admit that we are only grasping at something of the truth. But the second problem, I think, with the view that all religions lead to the same God, the second problem we're saying that is that actually that isn't a very tolerant thing to say either. We've seen that it's maybe not a humble thing to say. I also don't think it's a tolerant and respectful thing to say. I mean, just think about what tolerance is. At its most basic, tolerance is about allowing other people to have their say, allowing others to articulate their own beliefs and opinions, to have their say at the table. But this is precisely what saying all religions lead to God doesn't allow the different religions in the world to do. I mean, we might like to imagine that all the different religions in the world fit together like jigsaw pieces in a puzzle, but the truth is, if you look at them closely, they don't all mesh together. They say conflicting things. And to try and make them all say the same thing is actually to do violence to them all. It's not tolerant, it's not respectful, it's to make them be things which they aren't. I mean, let's just look for a moment at the three major religions in the world today, at least by numbers. And that would be Christianity, Islam, and Hinduism. Those are the three biggest religions in the world today. And let's ask them, you know, one basic question about religion. Who is God? Or what is God? Well, you see, they'd all respond in completely different and conflicting ways. Hinduism would say that ultimately there's not one God. You know, there's a supreme being who is over all and in everything, but this supreme being expresses itself through millions of ways, through creation, through a whole pantheon of gods. Some estimates are that there are 330 million gods in the Hindu pantheon. That's who God is, defined by Hinduism. But then when we ask Islam the same question, we get a completely different answer. Islam says there is one God, yes, but he is a complete unity. He is completely separate from creation. He doesn't pervade it and, you know, have expressions through the trees and all that sort of thing. No, he's a unity. He is completely separate from his creations. And then if you move on to Christianity and ask the same question, well, Christianity would say there is one God, but he is in three persons. He's not a unity, he is a tri-unity, he's a trinity. And he's expressed himself most amazingly in becoming a human. Whereas, Allah in the Islam faith is completely separate from creation. God apparently becomes part of his creation according to Christianity. And so, even by just asking this one basic question, who is God, we see that all of these religions, Hinduism, Islam, Christianity, all have completely conflicting ideas. And to try and say, well, they're all pointing towards the same thing, it's not a respectful way to treat any of them. It's to do violence to all of them. If you try and mesh them together, they all lose something of their distinct identity. No, a tolerant approach isn't to say they're all true, they're all part of the same thing. No, a tolerant approach is to allow each one to have its own say, to respect it by evaluating what it says. I mean, that's what we do with people we respect, don't we? We might not necessarily agree with them, but we evaluate their claims. Now, that's what we have to do with the religions around us today. Not say they're all part of the same thing, but look at them each individually and evaluate and see if we agree with what they say. And that really leads us on to the third problem, the third point I want to make this morning, which is the problem of Jesus. You see, the third problem we're saying that all religions are one and the same, that they're all part of the same journey towards God, is that Jesus throws a huge obstacle into that. He does not seem to allow us to say that. You know, when we evaluate Christianity and the claims of Christianity, we say Jesus say outrageous things about himself. You know, we might like to put Jesus, you know, in the same box as all the great religious teachers, you know, Gandhi and Muhammad and Buddha and all these other teachers, and say, well, they're all just pointing towards the same thing. But Jesus seems to rule this out completely. He says in John 14, verse 6, he says, I am the way, I am the truth, and I am the life. And then get this, he says, no one comes to the Father except through me. That is what Jesus says. He says, I am the only way to the Father. If you want to know the way, to know the truth, the only way you can get there is through me. You know, even if you could make all the religions in the world agree and make them all mesh together, Christianity would always have to be an outlier. Jesus just does not fit into that mix. Jesus is, if you like, a huge painting in an art gallery. A colossal painting that, if you're going to hang it up, would take up the whole wall. Now, Jesus gives us the option either of taking down all the other pictures and putting him up, or of ignoring him and allowing all the other pictures to stand. You know, the only other way you could get the Jesus picture on the wall is by cutting it up, doing violence to it. You know, the challenge of Jesus is that we either take him as he is, as the Lord of history, as the only way to know God, or we ignore him completely. Those are the only two things we can do with Jesus. We can't say he's, you know, part of a global, you know, religions, they're all leading to the same thing. No, you either take him as the only way, or you ignore him completely. And what many Christians around the world have found is that when Jesus says that he's the way to God, that he is trustworthy. Not least because he is the only man who has predicted his own resurrection and fulfilled it. I mean, I don't know about you, but when someone, you know, predicts their own resurrection and then rises back to life, I'm inclined to believe what they say. I'm inclined to believe them when they say that I am the way to God. You know, this is ultimately why Christians feel able to say that there is only one way to God. It's because that is exactly what Jesus says. You know, we don't say it because we hate other world religions or we're intolerant. No, we say it because we're just saying what Jesus said of himself. And if you think about it, Jesus, in saying that, he isn't being arrogant or intolerant. You know, if you look at the life of Jesus in the Bible, he was one of the most humble people around. He welcomed people of all walks of life. But yet he insisted that there is one cure for their disease. There is one cure for their need for God, and it is him. And, you know, that isn't an intolerant thing to say. You know, if a doctor were to say to you, there is one way that you can be healed from this disease, and it is this treatment, ignore all the other treatments, but only go for this one, we wouldn't say that the doctor is being arrogant or intolerant. No, we'd say the doctor's being a good doctor. He's giving us the best chance of survival. And Jesus, in saying to us, I am the way, I am the truth, I am the life, he's not being arrogant. No, he's giving us the one cure that will save us. He's giving us the one way to God that can actually give us the relationship with God we were made for. And he welcomes all to come to him. He doesn't say only those people who have done this or only those people who are like this. No, he says anyone who believes in me will receive eternal life. And that's the offer he makes to all of us. It's the offer he makes to you if you're watching this and you don't know him yet. And if you'd like to find out more about Jesus and what it is to follow him, we'd love to invite you to come and join us on a Sunday. We have live streams at 10 a.m. On Facebook and YouTube. You'd be more than welcome to tune into one of those. Also, if there's a specific question that you'd like me to answer in these Thursday Thoughts, do feel free to comment it or email me on Simon@Ascot Life Church. Would love to respond to you. It's been brilliant hearing some feedback from these videos, but that's it from me for this week. Do hope you have a great rest of your week. Maybe see you on Sunday and maybe see you next week for Thursday Thoughts too. Thanks very much.